mean to say, the NFL does at evaluating players?
It's actually getting better. It's funny. I've been doing a spreadsheet since 2012, and over the years we add more and more data. As more has become relevant, as more correlations can be found, stronger correlations. PFF started doing college data in 2016. So we start adding more and more of it, and throughout the years, you've seen some teams strictly, like you can see, like they're drafting very similar to how our grades come out too. Like the Eagles the last couple of years. Every year I'm like, the Eagles draft well. And everyone says that. But they also, you can tell, they're drafting high pedigree players that are athletes with great production at a young age. And, like, that's the formula, right? Those are the guys that tend to be very, very good. And you see other teams following it. So I would say over the years, especially the last 10 years, it has gotten much closer. If I went back 10 years from now, the 2015 board would look much different than how the consensus ended up going or how the draft ended up going. Now it's still far off in a lot of ways, but it's getting closer.
Do you feel like this draft in particular will prove to be a harder one to peg, because it feels like the plateau begins earlier, maybe mid first round, if not even before that, and runs through the second and into the third, as far as at least a lot of what I'm taking in here over the last few months. So that seems like there could be, I've said a few times, there's going to be guys picked maybe, as late as Friday night, like third round, that we thought were going to go in the 20s.
Yeah, I think it gets weird right from the beginning. I don't think the top five is a normal, strong top five compared to what we've seen over the last 5 years or so. And I think the impact of that will probably be felt. The teams picking 8, 9, 10 that would normally feel really good about a prospect landing there, that, hey, we still got a blue chip guy here. Probably not going to happen this year. So I think we could, one of two things. I went back and looked, right, to see, all right, in a weaker class, if it is, we've had other years like that. And what happens? And most of the time, teams will actually trade around to try and get that last first-round guy that they perceive as the last one. If they have 15, 16 first-round graded players, well, they get there at like pick 15 to 20, and they're like, we only have 2 guys left here. We should move up and get them. It's only going to cost us a third or a fourth-round pick to move 2 or 3, 4 spots. Let's go up and get that last guy. So you start to see a little bit of chaos happen in the 15 to 25 range, and I would expect we do see that again here, especially with the recent, last 10 days of where does Shedeur Sanders go, and is he falling back to, could he be there for the Steelers at 20, things like that. If that happens, then I do expect some movement. But on day 2, yeah, I think it's pretty strong on day 2, but for specific needs. If you need a corner, I think round 2 is going to look really good. If you need a receiver, rounds 2 and 3, like number 2, number 3 type receivers look really good. I think defensive end is extremely strong. I think interior offensive line is very strong. So if you need those spots, you're in a good position. If you don't need them, well, then it might be a tougher draft for you.
That's one thing right there on the surface that's different this year. You mentioned Sanders, and when the tier sort of flattens out, so to speak, and that's the lack of quarterbacks. Because last year, the other extreme, quintessentially, you had teams, I guess I want to say, forcing their quarterback picks. It worked out for Denver, and maybe all of them in the end.
We'll see about Atlanta, out. But yeah.
But if you're say sitting where Cincinnati is this year at 17, that happens, and good for you, because that's 6 picks you were not making in front of you. But this year, that's probably only going to be one guy.
Yeah, hopefully Jackson Dart and Shedeur Sanders and all them go. It's like when I'll scream during the draft, especially on day 1. Every time a quarterback goes after, the Bengals drafted Joe Burrow, we're high-fiving at that point. Like, all right, push another guy towards us. And this year it kind of feels like, man, I hope I've got 15 guys I'd like to have, and the Bengals pick at 17. I'm like, okay, we just need a couple receivers, and then, who is that going to be? This receiver class is kind of weak if you're not considering, or if, after Travis Hunter goes in the top 2, after that, when does Ted McMillan go? When does Matthew Golden go? Can they push a couple guys back to the Bengals at 17? So I'm going to be looking for that, receiver and quarterback.
Receiver is interesting for Cincinnati. It wouldn't seem obvious. Defense would after last year, and of course the Bengals keep chasing Higgins. But I saw one today that put the Bengals on Golden at 17. Do you think that that's realistic for Cincinnati?
I don't think so. They did have contact at the combine with a bunch of receivers, and that makes sense. That was before they extended T. Higgins, right? So they were doing their homework. They met with Emeka Ibuka. They met with Matthew Golden, Pat Bryant, a couple other lower-end guys. So, I just think they do their homework. They always draft a receiver at some point. I think it'll go the opposite. I don't expect them to take the receiver at all. 'Cause remember, third round last year, Jermaine Burton, he didn't work out his rookie year, but hopefully he takes a positive step to show he can do something in the NFL, and that'd be great. But they really don't need a receiver because Mike Gesicki pretty much acts as that third receiver.
What are the needs then? Like, what are you thinking that the Bengals? Like, what would be a good Thursday and Friday for you, if not the whole thing?
So because they are very inactive in free agency very often, they leave a lot of holes open when they enter the draft. And the draft is their primary source of upgrading talent, and they've left holes on both guard spots. They could find a guard and maybe double up in the first 3 rounds. I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. They need some pass rushers, whether that's at the edge or at defensive tackle. The only issue there is they've just spent 2 premium picks at defensive end recently and 2 at defensive tackle. You know, first rounder Miles Murphy, second rounder Chris Jenkins at defensive tackle, a third rounder McKinley Jackson and Joseph Osai. So they kind of want to see what those guys are. I expect they'll still draft a pass rusher at some time. I think they want Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon at 17 if they can have one. Walter Nolan probably being the prize if he's still there, which is mixed boards there say he will or won't be because he's got some character questions that have to be answered. But if he's there, I think the Bengals would love that. And then if they can get a guard in round 2 or 3, get a pass rusher as well, too. I think they could get a Walter Nolan at 17, a guard, whether it's Tate Ratledge from Georgia at 49, and then come back at pick 81 in the third round and say, all right, who's an edge rusher? Who's the best edge rusher? Who's the best linebacker? Who's the best safety for us? Get another defensive playmaker.
Is there any chance in your mind that something happens with Hendrickson next week leading up to Thursday or even on Thursday or Friday?
The Bengals are notoriously hard to trade with because they're going to overvalue their players. They always ask for too much, always. And it doesn't matter if I've heard it from a Bengals source or from an outside source that's an agent from someone else trying to get their player off the team. They're like, yeah, okay, they'll trade you, but they want a first-round pick. Well, no one's going to give you a first. So would you really actually trade them, or are you going to be open to negotiating? They are so hard-stance in what they want. I remember, it might have been 2017 now. It might have been 2016. But October 31st, it was Halloween. It was the trade deadline, and the Bengals are trying to trade A.J. McCarron to the Browns within the division. Hugh Jackson's there, right? And I think they're 0-8 at the time. And they've got the Browns are like, we'll give you a third-round pick for A.J. McCarron. And the Bengals are like, nope, we want a second and a third-round pick for A.J. McCarron. Like, who in their right mind would want a second and third-round pick? But the Bengals are playing hard all the way to the final deadline, that 4 p.m. trade deadline. And then Hugh Jackson says, okay, we'll do it, and tries to submit the facts. And apparently Andrew Berry, at the time, the GM pulled the plug on that and said, we're not giving him a second and third. What are you, crazy? But the Bengals wouldn't just take a third from McCarron. You got to be out of your mind, and sometimes they are when it comes to trading.
What was the story after that? Was it that was the trade even maybe announced and then unannounced? Yes. It was like that, right?
Yes, because it was like 3:55, 3:56, right before the deadline. I remember we were waiting to go out and go trick-or-treating with the kids, and I'm like, okay, let's just wait till 4 p.m. Let's see what's going on here. And it's like, yeah, Bengals get a second and third-round pick for A.J. McCarron. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. What a deal. And then it comes like 4:05. The NFL says that the paperwork didn't get through on time, and the trade did not happen.
Yeah, generously put by the league, I think, in terms of the Browns.
Well, how do you think the thing with Hendrickson will end, Joe? I mean, good credit to them. We've talked for years here. They did manage to find their way to keeping both Chase and Higgins, and the Higgins contract doesn't even seem like it. Like it's big dollars, but it seems like there's an out pretty quick. So good on them. What about Hendrickson?
Yeah, very team-friendly deal from T. T did a solid, actually. He took a little bit less to stay with the team. I want to say that. We as fans, I think maybe they'll take a hometown discount. Play here, a couple extra million. You don't need that. Stay with us. It never really happens. It's fairy tales. But this time it actually did, so I would like to give him credit there. But Hendrickson, I expect the Bengals to apply as much pressure on him as possible to take the offers they have given him, which means first round goes through, and Trey, no one called. No one gave an offer for a first-round pick. You sure you don't want this deal? Second, third round, same thing. They're not going to trade him, right? Nobody's going to offer enough picks. If it does happen, I'll be shocked, let's say that. And then after the draft happens, the Bengals still want Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson, from what it sounds like, still wants to be in Cincinnati. He just wants to be fairly compensated and would like a long-term deal with some guaranteed money. Is that too much to ask for the leading sack leader in the NFL? I don't think it is. So I think they'll come back together. It probably won't be as big of a deal as what Max Crosby and some of these other guys got, but I do think they'll find common ground, maybe on like a 2-year, $60 million deal added on to his final year that is 1 year for 18 and some change.
How good a season can the Bengals have? Like, they went to the Super Bowl, we know. Is that like going to be, depending on sort of if they're normal in this draft, fill a couple of holes like you'd expect? Hendrickson's on the field. I mean, that's the goal, I would think, for a lot of teams. Is that where your head would be for this season coming up off of what last year was? We kind of wrestle with Cincinnati in here, in the power ranking stuff we do, because like that was a fairly big step back, but also, I mean, a couple of fluky losses, shootout games, and I think we also would have said, we know, like the Bills wouldn't want to play them. At least that's how we were talking. I don't know. What does it all add up to for you in terms of expectations?
The roster is definitely worse than 2021. At the time, they just spent a ton in free agency for all the crap I gave them about not participating in free agency this year. In 2019 and 2020, leading up to 21, they were really strong. A lot of their defense was bought and paid for in free agency, and they were correct on all of them. I mean, Mike Hilton, Shelby Awuzie, Trey Hendrickson, DJ Reader, Von Bell. The list goes on. They were really good at acquiring talent, and the roster was pretty good, other than offensive line when they got to the Super Bowl. Ultimately was their failure there. But since then, you're now paying 5 times as much for the same guys when I'm talking about, like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. So you need to find that same talent in a different position, at a defensive end, at a linebacker, at a corner, whatever you draft. So it's really dependent on that. How well do they draft? And they haven't drafted well the last couple of years. And it's why they're in the situation they were. They were very top-heavy last year, very thin roster overall. And when guys started getting hurt, when the season started stretching on, even though they got a little hotter towards the end of the year, I think they really struggled to put it all together in a lot of ways. They started the year injured too. A lot of backups and role players weren't there to start the season. I think that hurt them. As long as in addition to all the contract issues they had last summer, that should be put to rest. Other than Trey Hendrickson, let's see on that. I think the upside still is you have Joe Burrow, you have these weapons. If you add another offensive lineman, let's say you add another pass rusher, the draft is good. I think that's why the hope every NFL season, every city, is, hey, if our team drafts well, we're right in this thing. And if you have the quarterback, I mean, obviously, if you have the QB and you have the weapons, you have the guys, if you draft well, you're right there. And I think that's what they're looking at here and saying, we're just 6 picks away from being where we want to be.
Would you expect them to dip into this, what looks like a pretty deep and rich running back class? I mean, Chase Brown's a nice story. I like him a lot. But beyond him, I mean, could it use a refresh there, you think?
Yeah, for sure. They brought back Samaje Perine as a third down, very, very minimum deal, no guaranteed money. So he's more of a running back 3, in my opinion. I don't think they have an RB2. I don't know what some of the fans, when I say, all right, they could draft a running back in the 3rd, 4th round, they lose their minds a little bit. Like, why? We got Chase Brown. You cannot give him the same load you had last year. He was getting 99% of the touches for a long stretch of that. And he didn't finish the year. He got hurt in the last game. And if they would have made the playoffs, he wouldn't have been able to play. And they've met with Ashton Genty and Cam Scatabo at the Combine. They've had local pro days because these guys are local with Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson. These guys are expected to go in round 2. I don't expect them to draft a guy there, but there are scenarios where I could see it happening. They've always valued running back. They've always drafted quarterback, receiver, running back, and just said, we'll figure the rest out for as long as Mike Brown has owned this team. So do I think if they're sitting there in the 3rd round and Dylan Sampson's there from Tennessee, yeah, I think they could do it, right? This is a very strong running back class throughout. I mean, we're talking into day 3. There's going to be there's analysts that have said they have 30 draftable grades on running back. That means every team is going to get one. So how high do you get one? Can he be RB2 this year? I don't know, but maybe if you wait until the 6th round, it's an RB3 situation. But there's a lot of room for improvement on that depth chart.
And, of course, like every team would be sort of thinking about what kind of running back they'd want. Like Brown can catch the ball, and he was durable. He did get hurt at the end, but he did hold up, as in college. So I don't know. I don't want to use the word niche here, but a guy like Henderson, Joe, who was a really good pass catcher for Ohio State, maybe seems to some like wouldn't be a 3-down back, but more of a complement. to a number one guy? Would you more see that? Some of these guys, like Omarion Hampton, who probably will not be in the Bengals' plans, could be a first-round pick. But that's a guy I think if you draft, he's on the field all the time. So you'd want to find, we have with the Bills an interesting little puzzle with Cook maybe not liking where he's at with his contract, and what Davis was kind of a bull, and Ty Johnson. You try to find that prototype, that build, where it's like the best complement to what you have already.
Yeah, I struggle with this because what is the right answer? Do you need thunder and lightning, or do you just need two lightnings sometimes?
Yeah.
Is that a bad thing to have two guys that could break off long runs? Like, Chase Brown's one of the most explosive backs in the league, but if I could get a hammer to go with him, even if it's a Cam Scatterbo and he's supposed to be in the fourth round or so, that's a guy that runs like David Montgomery for the Lions. That'd be great to pair with Chase Brown. I'd love that. But at the same time, if it's Jadon Blue in the fifth or sixth round that could also stretch it and run routes and catch, and that can run the same offense and not have to change anything, that sounds good too. So for me, maybe I'm different. Teams, it seems like they like a thunder and lightning approach. A lot of them do.
Makes sense.
But I think I would approach it as, give me two good running backs and I'll figure it out.
By the way, Bulldog, I know you're going to ask this, but Brown, of all current incumbent running backs in the NFL, he's one where whatever happens at the draft will affect his fantasy status either way, significantly. I think if the Bengals wait until Saturday to draft Jadon Blue, I think Brown goes up, and we start to have more confidence that he's going to be the clear number one again. And if the opposite, if they pick somebody in round
Friday
3
or something, yeah, right.
If they pick Dylan Sampson in Joe's one scenario, then I think that's going to be seen as bad for Brown. That's kind of true of everybody, but there's one where the situation seems pretty tenuous, and it could go either way. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely, and I think it's because a lot of fantasy analysts weren't as high on Brown. Don't get me wrong, there was a section of people that were like, "Hey, Chase Brown, he could do this," but we've seen a lot of day 3 guys that never amount to anything. I was in the belief that Chase Brown, when he gets this opportunity, could be their lead back. And from what I know from the Bengals, they loved Chase Brown and couldn't wait to get him more involved in the offense, right? And it was like, we're trying to, we're getting there, and then. That was week 4 or 5. He finally starts getting the share of the touches, and it's like, there he is. There's Chase Brown. So I think a lot of people still have a little 5th-round pick. He's not going to be the bell cow for long. We're talking about a short leash here with a running back. I agree. So if they don't draft a running back early, people are going to love him. But I think the Bengals love Chase Brown, and I don't expect them to go running back early at all.
Well, it's good that they love him, because we lived in a world here where Fred Jackson was the Bills' best running back for years, and all they kept doing was drafting guys to try to replace him. And he always ended up being better than everybody around him.
It's funny. I caught 5 minutes of your show last week. I think it was last week when I was leaving work, and you guys were talking about the C.J. Spiller drafts and things like that, and they always just continued to try to replace him, Willis McGahee and things, all those running backs.
Lynch,
yeah,
right.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, Davis Maddock and Hayden Winks last year on Chase Brown. Davis would be knows his college players, loved him as a prospect, and look at him. Look how fast he is, explosive, everything. And Hayden pointed out at one point from Underdogs, it's one play. There was a screen pass to Chase Brown in a game, maybe against Cleveland. He just ran straight line 50 yards down the right sideline. You can't stop using this one play. He's got to do something else for me to buy into this guy. But he definitely did have a successful season. Joe, what's your assessment of the Bills at this point? Picking 30, I don't know if you have a thought on their draft exactly, but we've been talking, of course, and it's kind of okay, they've got a couple holes to fill. It seems like maybe this draft will just sort of come to them.
Yeah, I think, even though they signed Trey White back, I think that could be a sign that they don't love the options there at 30, right? Or it could be, we get a veteran here and we'll draft a guy. Maybe he's not ready to be a full-time starter, whoever we draft at 30, which I think the corner class, actually, that's where the class starts to get involved, is late first round into the second round. It's not as strong as it was last year, where we had Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean on the spreadsheet as top 12 players in that class. I don't think we have one of those guys this year, even Will Johnson, although I think Will Johnson would be a great fit if he was somehow still there at 30 for the Bills. But if it's Maxwell Hairston, if it's Ezra Thomas, or maybe even Trey Amos, I think all those guys would fit well for the Bills at 30. I think they could use a big defensive tackle. Will Kenneth Grant still be there? Will Tyleek Williams be there? I think Tyleek Williams is every bit of a player that Kenneth Grant is. Tyleek's actually a little bit more agile, a little more fluid of an athlete. And at 330 pounds, he gained weight and was 330, put on weight for the combine. And I thought he looked excellent in that performance on the on-field stuff. I think Tyleik Williams is one of the best run defenders in this class. Put him next to Ed Oliver, and I would really like that pairing. And then are they still – it seems like a perpetual thing every year. We're going to talk about receiver and what kind of receiver do they need? Do they need more speed this time? Do they need someone that can get open? Is it a deep guy?
Yes.
Right. When the combine comes around, is it like is Matthew Golden, now that he's a guy, now he's expected to go a little bit early? Is Jaden Higgins, who I think has wide receiver 1 upside, scores super high for us, all worth that first-round pick. I think he's 24th on our board. Jaden Higgins from Iowa. If you want another 6'4", 214 guy, this guy actually has some speed and agility. He just doesn't have the yak ability. Everything else is there for Jaden Higgins. I would love that pick for the Bills. Or do you let it go a little bit later and you get a Kyle Williams in round 3 or so, or maybe at the back half of round 2 it might be, depending on where people see him. But I think that's where I'm looking at. And then I know Bulldog is high on Nick Emanwari, and you get a big guy that can patrol and do everything back there. And I think people are misevaluating Emanwari a little bit because he's so big. I see people instantly go, oh, is he a Cam Chancellor type? He's actually more Kyle Williams for the Ravens, who can cover the slot. His man coverage grade, based on our database, puts him in the 90th percentile amongst safeties going back to 2016. He is really good in man coverage for that size. He's in the top 10 of our board. I think he's number 6 right now. He's a strong prospect. There's a chance you're looking at a perennial all-pro player.
Joe, you put a lot of work into this, a combination of all different numerical factors and watching film. Is it available to the public?
It is, yeah. If you'll find it on my Twitter, I should probably pin the tweet. But look me up at Joe Goodberry on Twitter or on X, whatever you call it these days. But you'll find a tweet there somewhere.
And fish fries.
And fish fries. Hey, Western New York, right? That's what we do on Friday.
Let's go.
Oh, tonight. What a scene that'll be.
Good Friday.
It's the
fish
last
fries.
one, yeah.
Last one. Joe, thanks as always for your time. Good job.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You're welcome. Joe Goodberry on the West Her Hotline.